Okay, now we get to our gospel passage, which comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 35 through 45, which this fascinating thing. I'll explain it after I read it. But first, Mark 10, verses 35 through 45. It's also possible that a shorter option could be chosen, verses 42 through 45. So you may, when you get to Mass, hear a shorter version, but this is the longer one. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." He replied, "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit, one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Okay, so good. Now, what I think is so fascinating is, okay, so James and John come up to Jesus. So there's a bunch of fascinating things. James and John, who are typically in the inner circle of Jesus. So there's the 12, of course, but then within the 12, there's like three: Peter, James, and John. These three guys who are like, they're privileged to see the Transfiguration. They're privileged to see a particular miracle where Jesus heals someone, Jairus' daughter. They bring her back to life. That's Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, and John are in the Garden of Agony. So that hasn't happened yet, obviously, but they're in the Garden of Agony where Jesus, he brings all the 12 into a garden, and then he brings Peter, James, and John further into the garden. And then from there, he goes by himself. So like they're in the inner circle. So it would seem to be the case that it's not that outlandish that they ask this question about doing whatever we ask you to do, Jesus. So in some ways it fits, because you could easily see them getting the impression of like, oh, well, we're in Jesus's inner circle, and so maybe we actually can ask him these kinds of questions. And maybe that's not so crazy of us that, like we're part of this, we're part of the crew, So anyway, so there's that. Now what's the more fascinating thing is that we skipped some verses from last week to this week. So if you remember last week, our gospel passage talked about Jesus and the rich man, this rich young man coming up and asking Jesus, "What do I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus says, "Keep the commandments." He's like, "I've been doing that." So then Jesus says, "Okay, go and sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven, and then come and follow me." He goes away sad. So then Jesus says, "Okay, it's hard for people to it's hard, especially for those who have wealth, to enter heaven." And then Peter's like, "We've left everything. What about us?" And he's like, "Okay, whoever sacrifices more, there will be a greater reward in this strange kind of way." But then after that, there's a jump before we get to the current reading that we have. And that jump is verses 32 through 34. And in verses 32 through 34, Jesus talks about his passion. It's the third time that he predicts that he is going to be handed over, to be arrested, to be scourged, to be mocked, and to be crucified and die. And he'll rise on the third day. But anyway, so he explains that. And so it is right after that moment that James and John reveal that they just weren't really listening. And they're just like, "Okay, Lord, so I know you just talked about this tragic thing that's going to happen. But if you remember in the past times when we've read about it, it's like they didn't understand what was going on and they feared asking him about it. So they just didn't ask." So James and John just skip right over it. And they're like, "Okay, Jesus, here's the deal. We want you to do whatever we ask you to do." Like, what a bold question, given the fact that he just told them that he's about to suffer and die. Like he's gonna be killed, the death of a slave, the death of a criminal. And now they're just like, "Okay, but how about when you get to your glory, you just let us sit at your right hand and at your left, like your choice spots." It's just like, you can imagine Jesus, like last week, 2 weeks ago, we read about how Jesus, like, he becomes indignant when they stop the children. They rebuke the people who are trying to bring their children to Jesus. He becomes indignant, like this sort of like face palm kind of moment. You can imagine this being one of those moments where it's just like, oh my gosh, do you not get it? Do you not get it yet? And so then from there, he has to he has to say, okay, well, here's the deal. Can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I'm going to be baptized? Which they should know, because he just explained what this baptism was going to look like. Although he didn't clearly explain it, like, I'm going to suffer and this is going to be my baptism. So he doesn't fully explain it, I guess. But they should know he's asking, are you willing to share my life with me? And they eagerly are like, yeah, we can, totally. Which they just said, like, we're ready to suffer with you, because Jesus, right? He says this at the end. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So he's just telling them, like, look, I am the suffering servant. I'm that guy. And now you're agreeing that you're going to suffer with me. And for that matter, he goes on to say, well, okay, well, you're going to drink that cup and you're going to be baptized with that baptism. And we actually know that James was martyred. And we know that John was not martyred, but he suffered incredibly. The book of Revelation, he mentions, like, he's writing this book because he's in exile on the island called Patmos. I think the Christian tradition is that he was boiled in oil at one point in time. So he didn't suffer like the actual death of a martyrdom, but in some ways it's like worse. Like, wouldn't it be better to just have your head chopped off than to have to be boiled in oil and to be exiled? Now, well, I don't know. I think that might actually, because one is really quick and easy, and that's maybe too flippant of a thing. That's what I'm concerned about, that I'm being irreverent about this. And I probably am, so I need to repent of that. But still, I think it's like, what a crummy deal. And so both of these guys, these brothers, they make this bold claim, this bold request, and then a bold claim of, like, yeah, we can drink that. And then they have to actually drink it. And so that's, but then, so this is kind of a funny thing. Then Jesus is like, okay, well, this is the deal. You will actually do this. But by the way, to sit at my right or my left, that's not actually mine to give. So it's like he didn't kind of like baited them into, like, agreeing with this. Like, yeah, we're ready to suffer with you. And then he's like, oh, by the way, actually, that's not for me to decide who's going to sit at my right or my left. That's for whoever it's been prepared for, which the Father would prepare that. So anyways, I thought that was kind of a humorous moment of Jesus just being awesome and being great. Okay, so then what? So then the other 10, they hear this and they become indignant. So just like, remember, we talked about Jesus becoming indignant. You can imagine the 10 being like, oh my gosh, like, who do you guys think you are? Like, you two brothers, you think you're so, like, they're like indignant about it. Like, they're going on and on, perhaps, to the point that Jesus has to call them to himself. He's like, okay, you guys, get over here. All of you, come here. You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles, they lord it over them. In other words, they exert their power, they exert their authority over them and make them think that they want the same power, the same authority. Their great ones make their authority over them felt. Like, they make it so that it's like a tangible thing that you just want to grasp onto. And for whatever reason, James and John have been suckered into this. So you know that. Like, let's be understanding of them. But here's the deal. It's not going to be this way with you. I don't want you 10 to be indignant toward them, and I don't want these 2 to be thinking that they're superior to everyone else. Like, that's not what I came to be. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant. Right? Just like with that suffering servant. The servant is going to justify many. He's going to give his life as a guilt offering, a sin offering for many, and many people will be forgiven of their sins because of that. But the way that he is leading is by serving, by laying down his life. And so Jesus is saying, so it shall be for you. This is who I am. I am the suffering servant. And so it shall be for you. If any of you wants to be the leader, you need to lead by laying down your life. Don't lead for the sake of your own benefit, but lead for the benefit of others. Right? So that's the deal. Whoever wishes to be first will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many, to give his life as a sin offering. And notice that word again, that many. I mentioned last time with the reading from Isaiah that the word many by the time of Jesus had come to kind of connote this covenant community. Now Jesus says, like, I've come to give my life as a ransom for many. And we know that this ransom that he's going to give, it is all wrapped up in this new covenant in the Eucharist, where Jesus says, this is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you and for many. What a beautiful thing that Jesus does. And he suffers for us. He lays down his life in fulfillment of Isaiah 53, but also just like as a good God who loves us, who is trustworthy. And so we place our trust in him. Okay, now we're notice again, this will be preparing for our second reading, but notice again that he's giving his life. What does the priest do in the old covenant? The priest is the one who offers the sacrifice, even though the sacrifice is an animal, Jesus here is saying, look, I am offering myself as a sacrifice. And so I am the priest and the victim. We're going to hear more about this as Jesus being the great high priest in our second reading. So we'll look forward to that. Okay, God bless you.